Hello everybody, and welcome to your solar eclipse video for the solar eclipse in Magha Nakshatra, which takes place on the 21st of August 2017. This eclipse will be a total eclipse visible mainly over the United States and over South America. Other parts of the globe, like here in the UK, you may see things as a partial eclipse during part of the day. I'm not going to go into when the eclipse will be visible and where, because that it really just kind of depends on area. But one thing I will tell you is that solar eclipses always take place on the new moon. And what happens is, just briefly, when you have the moon and the sun connecting with each other, which is, of course, what makes a new moon, and both of those planets are in connection with either Ketu, the south node, or Rahu, the north node. This particular eclipse happens in conjunction with Rahu. And what happens is the shadow of the moon, from our perspective here on Earth, gets cast upon the sun. And that really kind of tells us a lot in terms of the symbolism of what tends to happen with eclipses on the psycho-spiritual level, so to speak, because the moon relates to our manas, or our sensory mind. In short, it relates to our experience of consciousness, our subjective experience of consciousness, what our senses pick up on, how we see things, how we view things, how we feel about things, right? And if a shadow of that is getting cast upon the sun, which relates to the Atman, which the closest significance we can find in regard to ourself in association with that is our own soul, then what happens is, something with the path of the soul is being misperceived because of a shadow being cast upon it by the emotional body, right? So on some level, you may not be seeing things quite as clearly as you might be able to see them. Doesn't mean there's not a chance to see them more clearly. And as a matter of fact, with eclipses, they tend to have a bit of a revelatory process. Quite often that happens over a period of time, most especially between the period between the two eclipses, right? Which the next eclipse will be in 6 months from now. I'm not going to give you the exact date because that's so long in the future, right? So if you'd like to know a little bit more about what this particular eclipse is going to mean for you as an individual, please do feel free to schedule an astrological service through the astrological services page of my website. There are some spaces available on my schedule between now and the solar eclipse on the 21st, okay? So let's get down to the nitty-gritty in association with this, right? What are you upset about? Where in your life has somebody kind of placed an ideal upon you that really does not relate to who you are as an individual? So what do I mean by an ideal placed upon you? Well, think about it when you grew up. And it might be a parent, it might be an ancestor, could also just be somebody that you're connected with in life, right? But an ideal placed upon you. What I mean by that is, imagine when you grew up, and like if you had a parent that told you, when you grow up, you're gonna be this, or when you grow up, you're gonna be a carpenter, or when you grow up, you're gonna be a street sweeper, or when you grow up, you're gonna shovel out the stables, or when you grow up, you're gonna be a doctor, or you're gonna grow up and be any number of things, right? But who are you really wanting to grow up to be? You're wanting to grow up to be yourself, right? The only thing is when an ideal is placed upon you, then you tend to feel like you don't really get a chance to live up to who you are as an individual, right? Whose responsibility is that? Is it fully the responsibility of that person who has placed an ideal upon you? Well, maybe, but it's also your own responsibility to go, no, enough. Okay, enough is enough. I've had enough of that. The only thing is when you've had enough of it, you don't have to kind of, make a super big point for a super big, long period of time, extra alidocious, adding lots of adjectives on the end of it. I guess what I'm saying is you don't have to go to such a deep extent, and you don't have to prove something to the other person. Unless perhaps maybe you feel like you have to prove something to yourself. Do you have to prove something to yourself? No, ultimately you just have to be yourself. Sure, ultimately it may take an initial amount of rebelling against that ideal that has been placed upon you. It may involve a certain degree of a power struggle with another individual, right? It may involve on a certain level you feeling as if you have to kind of hide your feelings and conceal who you really are in order to move on with the situation, right? But do you really have to do all of those things? And why am I going into all those things? Well, let's kind of take it apart piece by piece and see a lot of what's going on. With this particular solar eclipse, we have 4 planets within a little bit over 8 degrees of each other in Magha Nakshatra. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Magha Nakshatra and see if we can understand a little bit about that. Right? Magha Nakshatra is connected to the Pitris, the forebears, the ancestral deities, those who came before. In mythology, they are the ancestors of an individual who are near the individual and are there to guide the individual upon their evolutionary path. The only thing is they like to function more like guardian angels, so to speak, right? So they only kind of want to drop subtle hints here and there about, what you need to do or what you should do in order to take the next step, because they want you to be able to have a strong will, right? Everybody goes off about how oh, this person's egotistical, right? And how the ego is so bad. Well, guess what? You need to have an ego on a certain level in order to be here in this existence. In order to go through the process that you're going through in life, in order to evolve, you have to kind of have a foundation. You have to have some stability through which you can grasp onto the experiences that you're actually going through, right? What happens, though, is eventually the ego gets too strong. Right? So the Pitris, what they want is they want you to have a healthy ego that goes, right, I'm making good decisions for myself. I'm making the right decisions that honor who I am as an individual. I'm making the right decisions that honor my own dharma. I'm making the right decisions that honor what I really want to do in terms of where I want to take my life. I'm making the right decisions that really ultimately honor my own emotions and make me feel secure inside of myself. That's what the Pitris want you to do, especially with this particular solar eclipse in Magha Nakshatra. The only problem is you're likely having a very hard time doing that. Why? Well, you're concerned about your dignity. You're concerned about your sense of honor. You're concerned that, if you don't kind of push hard up against the resistance, that somehow you're not going to have the change that you really need to see coming into your life, come into your life. You're concerned that nothing is going to move at all unless you take some really rash steps. But actually, if you push too hard against the resistance, it's actually going to end up in a situation where you're doing less help to yourself. And actually, you're probably creating more difficulty for yourself in regard to the situation you're dealing with. Now, what areas of your life might this be impacting you in? Well, I'm going to give you some hints, but again, in order to get the clear, full picture, you can schedule an astrological service with me through the astrological services page of my website, and you can get a clear understanding of what this particular eclipse period is all about for you. If you know a little bit of simple astrology, look at where Mars rules in your chart. Okay, that's going to signify some of the, let's say, the stage, right, that this particular set of circumstances is going to play itself out in. So, for example, if you have Mars as the 4th and the 11th Lord because you have a Capricorn ascendant, well, this may, kind of play itself out through your mother and an elder sibling, or it could play itself out through property and gains. things along those lines, right? Something along those lines that perhaps you're trying to see some movement, some actual concrete realization of your goals, but you're maybe feeling as if it's not coming together as quickly as you might like for it to. And so then you find yourself in a position where you're having to take, like, you feel like you have to kind of take some harsh steps in association with it. Why harsh steps? When you have Rahu connecting with Mars, it can create some explosions, and it can sometimes create like power struggles with other individuals. Usually what this relates to is the fact that somewhere in your life you haven't been honoring your own will in terms of what you really want out of your life and how to take the best and most appropriate steps towards that. So let's say, for instance, you are somebody who is a Leo ascendant. Well, this could play itself out in association with your mother and your father, right? So it really depends on where Mars rules in your chart. And equally, it's going to make a difference in regard to where the moon rules. So let's say you're that Capricorn ascendant. Well, there can be some problems in your relationship that are tying in association with property and equally with gains, right? Let's say that you are that Leo ascendant, right? There can be some problems with expense somehow tying into your mother and father, or maybe you want to go as far away from your mother and father as you possibly can. There's so many different ways that it can play itself out. But some of the key themes in association with this, as we have Mars, Rahu, the moon, and the sun all coming into close proximity with each other, are power struggles with somebody else. Within those power struggles, there's a certain side of what you really want out of life, or the way you want to take direction in life, or how you want to approach things, how you want to structure things logically. All those things can be coming to the surface, and those things perhaps you're not honoring. And so then it projects outward onto the stage of your life and manifests itself in terms of a power struggle with somebody else. But mainly it will generally relate to a power struggle that you have within yourself, okay? Rahu, obviously, at the time of the eclipse, is going to be in close proximity to the sun. Well, with Rahu-Sun connections, quite often, there can be this feeling of, I don't know who I am. And most especially with eclipses. I don't know who I am. Well, you could get out your wallet and you could check your driver's license or something like that if you really wanted to. Or, you could just kind of spend some time with yourself and try to figure out, wait, am I really kind of doing the things in my life that place me in a position that are going to make me feel like I'm taking the right and appropriate steps? Now, this particular solar eclipse may be difficult on a certain level, but this is happening in association with a very strong sun, right? So some key things that you need to bring into the equation, because something else that happens with Magha Nakshatra, and I'm going to explain a little more deeply, is each of the nakshatras has a particular, or I should say it represents a particular stage on the evolutionary journey. So with Ashwini Nakshatra, that's the very first spark of creation. You ever heard that line from, one of your parents, oh, when you were just a spark in your mother's eye or something like that, right? Well, that's the very first spark that, kind of creates the coming into being of us as individuals. And Ashwini relates to the primal spark before it comes into manifestation, right? Well, basically, when you get to Magha Nakshatra, the primal spark has gone through all these different transformations and transitions to the extent that it's beginning to become encased in a material form. Somewhere inside of itself, it remembers the source from which it came. Somewhere inside of itself, it recognizes where it is at this particular moment in time. And maybe within itself, it feels pretty upset at having lost its connection, or so it thinks, with that primal source. Now remember the Petries? It's similar to losing that connection to the Petries. Petries are there to guide you, to help to connect you back to that source, right? Only somewhere you've lost the way. And because you feel on a certain level like things have gone horribly wrong, you've gone, well, you know what? All that. I'm going to take charge of this situation. I can handle it. And you may become a little bit proud in terms of how you're wanting to handle things. And with this particular solar eclipse, there can be tendencies towards pride too. mainly because you're not really sure of what you want, right? Or maybe you are sure of what you want, but you've never been able to feel like you deserve it. Maybe you never felt validated for who you are as an individual, right? Maybe, you tried hard as a child to, get the respect for, being, good musically, or, maybe you, during school, you played sports or something and you never got validated for that, or you never got validated for the good grades you got, right? Somewhere inside of yourself, you can carry that wound with you. And so then you feel like you got a point to prove. Right? So somewhere in your life, tying in with where Mars rules in your chart and where the moon rules in your chart, you feel that you have a point to prove, but you don't really have a point that you have to prove. All you have to do is to just make decisions for yourself. Certainly you may have to voice those decisions to somebody else, dependent upon the situation. And sure, it may bring a little bit of tension, but you don't have to conflagrate that tension. What does conflagrate mean? Some people don't know that word. I know that. It means make it into an explosion. You don't have to make it higher than it actually is, right? Also, with this particular eclipse, you may be prone to hiding your emotions from yourself. You may be prone to wanting to hide from your emotions and just kind of, flee into your head or flee into your imagination or pull the blanket up over your head or something like that, right? But you know what? You need to take a look at that too. Am I hiding my feelings? How long have I been hiding my feelings, right? And if I'm hiding my feelings about what it is that I truly want, and if I'm hiding my feelings about what it is that I truly am, do I need to kind of cover up all of that pain, all of that difficulty, all of that hardship that I feel about this, and just kind of rebel against it and push up against the, resistance that I feel like I'm encountering? Well, sure, as I said at the outset, a certain degree of that might be necessary, but only to start the ball rolling. Once the ball is rolling, just recognize, you know what? There's no point to prove. There's only me to be. And there's only me to be in alignment with, being the best that I can be, right? So again, take a look at where Mars rules in your chart. Take a look at where the moon rules in your chart. That's most likely going to be the stage that this particular set of circumstances plays itself out. And if you, again, would like information, more deep information on how this pertains to you as an individual, please do feel free to schedule a consultation with me through the Astrological Services page of my website. That's going to do it for this solar eclipse video, for the solar eclipse in Magha Nakshatra that takes place on the 21st of August, 2017. Until next time, my dear friends, please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.